Register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Okay. Okay. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. This motherfucker actually said that shit. If you ain't black. Oh man. Okay. Let me compose myself. Okay. No, serious. Welcome to the show. It's Friday. Oh man, I needed that laugh. I have not. It's been a rough week. It's been a rough couple of months. But you just knew. You just knew it was only a matter of time before Joe Biden. What are they gonna blame this on his stutter? Okay. That was the I can't even get it out. Okay, seriously. That was the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party on one of the biggest radio shows in this country, The Breakfast Club with Charlemagne the God. And that show broadcasts to millions of people across the country every single day. And this is the shit that the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party decided to say. And you should have seen his face. Like he smiled like he just slam dunked, like he hit a home run. This is what he said to millions of black people that were listening live, not to mention the entirety of the black community that's going to hear this. Everybody is going to hear this. I want you to understand, not only because it was the Charlemagne the God and that show has so much cultural saturation. I mean, it reaches down into every part of the black community, but everybody is going to hear this shit. And boy, oh boy, did he not just make it easier for Donald Trump to win another 4 years? This is the reason I've been so upset with the Democratic Party. I just so much so I just kind of stepped away. I mean, I do my show every single day, but on Twitter I just kind of stepped away and not really engaged in politics so much because it blew me away that they would pick the person who was the least qualified to win, most qualified to lose, 100% guaranteed to have a series of gaffes like this. And the thing about this is not a gaffe. Let me correct myself. This is not a gaffe. This is what happens when you believe that you are entitled to the black vote, when black people who are getting a check don't put you in check. Well, that's a turn on words, but when they don't put you in check and they make you think that you're really down, like people actually like you and not just tolerating you to get rid of Orange Julius in the White House. Like somebody really needs to tell these white politicians that black folks don't really rock with you. You got a handful of niggas who would rock with you because you write them a pretty good check, but for the most part, we don't with you. Out here talking about, you don't vote for me. Let me hear that again.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Shit ceases to be funny when you hear the entitlement in this man's voice. And when you think about how he just made this so much easier for Donald Trump, it is infuriating because we gotta get rid of Donald Trump. We have to. And you know, Donald Trump's racist ass knows how to weaponize this clip. This is going to be on commercials everywhere starting before the end of, guarantee you there's going to be a commercial before the end of business today. Joe Biden just made it that much easier for Donald Trump to win. And so now it moves from being hilarious because I can't believe the nerve of this dude to being infuriating because this is the person that the Democratic Party put up to beat Donald Trump. In the middle of an astroturfed black conservative, black Trump supporter movement where they're pouring millions of dollars, in billions if you count the media, that they're pouring into the black community to try to give the appearance that black people actually rock with Donald Trump when any reasonable black person knows Donald Trump is the white supremacist in chief. But this is what the Democratic Party has given us. This is what their political machinations has wrought. They all got real smart, said, how do we beat the socialists? Well, if we just, here's how you beat the socialists. If everyone just drops out, little Pete, drop out and we'll get you a cabinet position. That's the best Barack Obama impersonation I got. You know, this is what you've done, Barack Obama. Thanks, Barack. Now, the flip side of this is that he absolutely has to pick a black woman VP at this point. So things are looking up for Stacey Abrams finally. Finally, Stacey Abrams is having a good day. And listen, I didn't have anything against Stacey Abrams, but man, it's just the way she played herself with the Tara Reid situation, with this whole thing. But no, you can put that behind us now because she's got a good day. It's going to be the Stacey Abrams or Kamala Harris, or it may be even Susan Rice now, because he can't possibly be dumb enough. Yes, he can, says the narrator. He can't possibly be dumb enough to not pick a black woman at this point. Do you know how few black people would show up to vote for this decrepit, cognitive decline looking, mashed potatoes eating because his dentures are falling out, crime bill signing ass motherfucker if he don't pick a black woman VP? More black people would show up to vote for David Duke than to vote for this man. And I got a crazy feeling that his consultants are stubborn enough and stuck in their ways enough to do the dumbest possible thing at this juncture, which would be to pick somebody like Amy Klobuchar or Governor Whitmer of Michigan, despite the fact that he just insulted the entirety of the black community, with the exception of the blue check mark bourgeois Negroes, misleadership class who are going to come to his rescue. But setting aside that portion, any black person, you ain't black if you ain't offended by what this man said. Oh man, my apologies to my interview today. I've got a guest coming on, John Nichols of The Nation. Man, John, I apologize that you came on the show on a day when Joe Biden really struck a nerve in me. I think the last bit of civility that I had left just went the fuck out the window. I'm sorry, John. It's going to be a very intelligent conversation, and you're going to be like, I know this is not the same host during this interview that's opened up the show, but it's not every day that the candidate for president, honestly, this is worse than when Donald Trump's big appeal to the black community was, well, what do you have to lose? What the hell do you have to lose? And now the Democratic Party has given Donald Trump exactly what he needs to win. That's the sad thing about this. That's the only way to really look at this. Besides the offense to the black community, right? We'll handle that ourselves. We'll take care of that offense ourselves. But in terms of electoral politics and the future of this nation and the president of the United States overseeing 40 million Americans being unemployed, 2.5 million this week? I didn't see the actual numbers, but I know we were at like 38 million last week, right? So now we're 40 million Americans unemployed. We're approaching 100,000 that have died from the coronavirus expressly because of the mishandling of this coronavirus by Donald Trump. And the Democratic Party just gave this man basically everything he needs to win. Bottom line, I'm sorry, he could pick a black VP if he wants. But at this rate, Joe Biden is going to lose the election before Election Day. And with that, I'm going to back off. Let's do this patron party, and we'll get to the interview with John Nichols.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. Very special welcome and thank you to all of our newest patrons without whom this show is entirely impossible. Welcome aboard to Garrick Starks. Thank you for becoming a patron. Julia Deutsch, thank you for becoming a patron. Julietta Fox, thank you for becoming a patron. Daniel Stone, thank you, sir, for becoming a patron. And bounce. Faye Chang, thank you for becoming a patron. I got a feeling I said that wrong. McKenna McCaddy, thank you for becoming a patron. And Nicole Del Nuccio, thank you for becoming a patron. Everybody just bop. It's a patron party, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/the BPD show. That's where you'll get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, unedited interviews without any of the corporate advertisements that you're going to hear right here.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Joining me now is John Nichols. He is the national affairs correspondent for The Nation and associate editor of the Capital Times. He is the author of The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. John, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
I am especially good now that I'm talking to you, my friend.
I appreciate that. I followed you sometime on Twitter, and I love reading your work and seeing your take on the politics of our day. There's so much to talk about in the broader theme of fighting for the soul of the Democratic Party. But I just kind of want to ask you kind of bluntly, is there anything worth saving?
There may not be that much worth saving, but there is much that is worthy of building.
Okay,
and that's the way to look at it. I think of political parties really as shells, as buildings that you can go into and you can do things with. Mm-hmm. And for progressives, for people who have a vision for economic and social and racial justice, for saving the planet, and for getting us out of this horrible cycle of wars and militarism, the Democratic Party is an incredibly imperfect vehicle, mm-hmm. But it is the one that most people who share at least some of these values and some of these ideals have in recent decades chosen. Mm-hmm. to work within. And it is also one of the big institutions that has the structural forces of our country sustaining it. Mm. And so in some ways it is an easier place to operate than in a third party or an independent movement. Although I don't tell people not to do those things. Right. I tell people to do their journey, tell them to go where their politics takes them.
Right.
But I will tell them that trying to turn the Democratic Party, as difficult as that is, does hold out some options.
So let's talk about the difficulty, and I'd like for you to frame it in context of your book. It's out now, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. What caught my attention was your tweet the other day, on the 18th. You said, in 1944, Henry Wallace said Democrats must unswervingly endorse economic democracy, regardless of race, color, or religion. The party refused, ending the era of New Deal striving. Now, if there is to be any hope for the future, it must begin anew. So talk about, in the context of your book, the fight that you see that can be had.
Sure. And the way that I frame it is this. I think that for 75 years, since the end of the New Deal era, since the death of Franklin Roosevelt, there has been a struggle for the soul of the Democratic Party. Now, I know your work well enough to know that you know that the New Deal coalition was a messy coalition.
Yes.
It went all the way from civil rights campaigners to segregationists. It included bankers and socialists. Mm-hmm. And so it was in many ways too big right? It was never going to hold together.
Right.
Um, but at its best, it had a striving, a sense that you give us a great big problem, we'll take it on.
Okay.
And so if the problem was a depression, we'll take it on. With rural electrification and jobs programs and all the things that are associated with the New Deal. You give us a fight against fascism in Europe, we'll take it on, and we'll pull things together and beat the bad guys. So it was that level of ambition. And back in 1944, Henry Wallace, who was Franklin Roosevelt's vice president, said, along with A. Philip Randolph, the head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and so many other visionaries, we're going to win this war against fascism in Europe. Then we have to come home and fight against what Wallace referred to as Americanized fascism. And he identified that bluntly as racism. He said racism, sexism, division along lines of class, these were the things that you had to come home and fight against in America.
Right.
Because if we could beat it, if we said it's evil in other places, then it ought to be viewed as evil here.
Interesting.
And that was, frankly, and Randolph was saying it too on the outside, doing incredible movement building. I read a lot about that in the book. That was too much, frankly. That was too much for the bankers and the big city bosses and the segregationists in the Democratic Party, and they pushed Wallace aside. They marginalized him and essentially forced him onto a journey that put him on the fringe of the politics of the country. And my warning is that the party has done that again and again and again.
Right.
In the 60s, when amazingly enough, A. Philip Randolph was still a dynamic figure trying to push and pressure. The great strides of the civil rights movement, there was an effort to link them to economic justice. And once again, the advocates for that tended to be pushed aside and got lost in the Vietnam War. And you can just see it again and again throughout history. And all I would say to you, my friend, is this. We've reached a point now, 75 years on, where it happens as we speak. We're in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic and mass unemployment of a Great Depression level. The planet is in crisis.
Yeah.
We still haven't addressed structural racism. We still haven't addressed structural sexism. I mean, there's so many things that we have to deal with. It's insufficient. It's just insufficient to have a cautious, go back to the way it was, or maybe make it a little bit better vision. That's just not enough.
So let me frame it this way. In your research, in your writing, and even in this conversation, you've outlined how Democrats have consistently gone the wrong direction. So are we not pushing people on a fool's errand? Like it's something. It feels like it's something that transcends the generations, right? We ebb and we flow in terms of a little bit further to the left, and then going back right with some neoliberal economic policies. Why is there this consistent theme of Democrats rejecting the right move?
Oh, it's money in politics,
Yep.
and it's the sense of compromise and caution. And so you have two different groups of people here, and this is an important thing to do. You have the moneyed interests, the campaign donors, the campaign consultants who get the money.
Yep.
And they're often very, very cynical. They recognize that they are effectively buying a party, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one side. But then you also have really sincere people who are actually often quite progressive, but have been told by our media and by our political elites again and again and again, you just can't go for what you really want, right? You gotta pull your punches. And the end result is that the Democratic Party, which has evolved in some very good ways over time, doesn't evolve as quickly as it needs to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I argue in the book was in 1944, when Wallace said, we got to address racism, he was right. It was the time to do it. He wasn't 20 years ahead of his time, and neither was A. Philip Randolph. They were right in that day to say that that's the time to address it. If they had many things would have been different and better.
Right.
And similarly, the people in the '60s who said, have to address sexism and still racism and still economic disparity. They were right. And so slowly but surely there has been progress. I recognize that progress, but it pains me too much to make apologies for those who always compromise. And so I think we have to call them out. And I do understand really good people who say, this is a fool's mission. You can never make the Democratic Party right. But you know what? I tend to take a lesson from, of all people, the Republicans. Because, in the 1950s, you had really right-wing Republicans who hated Eisenhower. They thought he was too liberal. And you know what? They were right. He was better than them. And on a whole bunch of issues.
Right.
And then in the 1960s, they kind of got control of the party. They nominated Goldwater, but he lost terribly.
Right.
And now they could have just said, oh, it's a fool's mission, right? Because then Nixon, they didn't like Nixon all that much, and then Ford and all that stuff. But no, they kept on banging away at it. And they finally changed the platform of the party to be more socially conservative in the 70s. And then they got their hero Reagan in 1980. And then, they weren't satisfied. They were not satisfied. Reagan wasn't right wing enough.
Right.
And so they kept pushing further and further. Now they have created a Republican Party today that is, I would say, it's now beyond conservatism.
Right.
It's moved toward an authoritarianism and a really ugly, ugly politics. But there is no question that over a substantial period of time, sincere conservatives moved that party way to the right. And what I would argue is that a progressive vision, which I happen to think is a dramatically superior vision, and frankly, the necessary vision for these times, if pursued aggressively, has the potential to move the Democratic Party to the left. And I would say for those who choose to work within the Democratic Party, and if you choose another vision, if you choose to do, just on the street activism, if you choose to go to the grassroots, if you choose to do, an independent third party thing, whatever, if you choose to do that, I respect, and I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to write about you. I'm going to be interested in what you do. But if you do choose to work within the Democratic Party, understand that it really is a fight for the soul. It's always a fight for the soul. And the neoliberal forces know that.
Right.
The cautionary status quo forces know that. They fight with everything they've got. They cut every corner. They push harder than you can imagine. Why shouldn't progressives fight as hard? Because, again, I will say, and this is my editorial judgment here, progressives have that better vision. And frankly, right now, it is no longer a vision. It's a necessity.
The rest of that interview is going to be available for patrons immediately after the closing of the public show. You definitely want to go check out the book. And also, you want to become a patron and get the rest of the interview. We got a chance to really discuss if fighting for the Democratic Party is a fool's errand. And the question that I asked that I think is pertinent, maybe I'll make the whole episode public today. I'll think about it. Let me figure that out by the end of the music. But the question that was so pertinent was, how is it that, it's going to be public, because he said, I asked him the question, how is it that he could actually still be hopeful after all the times the Democratic Party has shown us that they have no soul for us to fight for? And I think his answer to that is something that's worthwhile breaking the paywall and getting it to everyone. So stay tuned after the closing music. In the meantime, let's talk about these goddamn billionaires. American billionaires, according to CNBC, American billionaires got $434 billion richer during the pandemic. So while everyone else is losing their jobs, while people are dying, billionaires are getting richer. U.S. billionaires saw their fortunes soar by $434 billion during the nation's lockdown between mid-March and mid-May. Wow. That quick of a time, $434 billion. according to a new report. Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg had the biggest gains. Bezos added $34.6 billion to his wealth, and Zuckerberg added $25 billion. Actually, the language that they used, I think, is apropos. They said Zuckerberg picked up $25 billion, which is like, pretty simple, easy thing to do. Apparently, once you have such an obscene amount of wealth, it's pretty easy to pick up $25 billion more in a 2-month period. There's another article that I could juxtapose with this, but actually I'm going to save it. The article that discusses Barack Obama being on his way to becoming a billionaire himself. I'll talk about that after the closing music. But here's the thing. The fact that we have an economic crisis going on around us while anybody is profiting at this obscene level, and the fact that they have loopholes in their tax code which makes sure that they pay the bare minimum taxes. In some cases, their secretaries pay a higher tax rate than they do. In other words, they have the bare minimum commitment to the exact same country and same group of people from which they derive their obscene wealth. They are taking everything and giving us nothing. And this is what happens during normal times, but it seems to be exacerbated during this pandemic. Now, obviously, it's because more people are staying at home and having to shop on Amazon or shop, wherever they can get stuff delivered to them. More people are on Facebook, so ad revenue is going up for Mark Zuckerberg. That's fine. And here's the thing that I was talking about yesterday. It would be different. Here's the kicker. It would be different if Jeff Bezos was not treating his employees like shit. You know what? The need to have a company that can deliver content to you, to your doorstep as quickly and as efficiently as Amazon is a value add to society. So it's not as though we're looking at Amazon and saying, oh, this is some useless creation and he doesn't deserve it because he hasn't earned it in the sense of his creation. He hasn't earned it in the sense of his labor by any measure. But that's not good enough. They have to crush their employees. They have to refuse to give them PPE. They have to make it so much pressure on the employees that there reports years ago, reports of people having to pee in buckets so that they won't miss their productivity targets. Where they have to fight they just started getting $15 an hour. Where they had to fight just to have a decent modicum of a living, of a lifestyle. And Jeff Bezos has made more money in the 2 months during this pandemic than it would take for him to rectify every concern that his company has, that his employee has. But instead of doing that, it's not enough. They have to hoard all the wealth instead of doing everything that they possibly. He could take his pocket change, his pocket lint, and make sure that every employee in his company has exactly what they need to never, ever have a complaint. But this is not the model of capitalism. This is not the model of corporatism. This is not the American way. The American way is take everything you can from the society from which you derive your wealth and crush the bones of your labor force. Crush them so that they are so demoralized that they don't have the ability to expect a better lifestyle. So that they are so demoralized that they feel like they have to come and get this $725 an hour and work 40 hours a week and still need food stamps and still need assistance. That is the model of capitalism in this country. That is the model of America. And that shit's got to change. All right. Everybody stay tuned in. It's a Patron Friday for everybody. But go to patreon.com anyway / the BPD show so that you don't have to listen to all the advertisements I'm going to jam pack in this show. See you in a second.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com / the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
All right, welcome back to the public. Patrons, you didn't go anywhere. You've been here the whole time. But let's get back to the show. All right. Let's go. Speaking of billionaires, there's a new book coming out next week called Team of Five, The President's Club in the Age of Trump. And it is written by Kate Anderson Brower. In the book, she claims that Barack Obama is on track to become the first post-president billionaire. It's going to be so funny to watch. Somebody said this on Twitter, so this is not my original thought, but I thought it was good enough to mention. I just don't know who said it. I'm not going to go searching for it. Just know it's not my original thought. It's going to be so satisfying to see conservatives turn on billionaires because, the only thing that they hate more than money is Barack Obama. I mean, these people would literally shoot themselves in the foot if they could they'd probably kill themselves if they could get rid of Donald. If they could erase Barack Obama from the history of America, I bet you they would do mass suicide like a ritual. You know what I mean? They will sacrifice themselves on the altar of their white supremacy to get rid of Barack Obama. So it's going to be interesting to see them turn on the fact that he's a billionaire. Obviously, they'll just say he's corrupt, blah, 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 blah. But setting that aside, I got a problem with this. When is enough fucking enough? When is enough? This is my problem. When will people look and say, oh, I have $500 million. I'm good. Shit. I'm good with what my patrons give me. Like, at what point do you say, I don't need a bigger house. I don't need more servants. I don't need a yacht. I don't need a second yacht. Even if I got the first yacht. Apparently, the answer is, not apparently, clearly, the answer is it's never enough for anybody. And look, I hate all billionaires, okay? Eat the rich, every single one of them, black or white, indifferent, I don't care. Because at some point, at some level, you have either abused your labor force to get that wealth, or maybe you're in a tech company and you have abused our data to get that wealth, or maybe you didn't abuse the data, blah, blah, blah. You looked at the world around you and said it was better for you to collect this wealth and hoard it than to do anything for all of the broken people around us. So I got an issue with all billionaires, black, white, other. And I'm definitely going to have an issue with Barack Obama being a billionaire when, as president of the United States, what did he do for hurting, broken, marginalized, poor people in this country? He did not change that. So he is not the people's billionaire. There's no such thing as that shit anyway. But it's fundamentally a problem in society where we created a system where we reward people. We reward people based on one of the worst traits. It's if you're a Christian, it's one of the 7 deadly sins, greed. And that's what we built an entire system off of, so that everybody, no matter where they come from, no matter what race, no matter what path they had to overcome the thing, no matter what, people mobilize and weaponize that greed to hoard wealth while there are so many people on the face of Barack Obama went to Flint, Michigan and drank bottled water, or drank a cup of water knowing it was bottled water. You know that shit was a bottled water. He drank the water, ignoring the fact that they still did not have clean water, mocking them. And now years later, they still don't have clean water. Is he going to take a portion of his wealth to fix that? Somewhere, somebody has told him he's already done enough and he's entitled, go ahead and get your money. Get your bag. Get your bag, Barack. Yeah, get your bag. But at what cost? I'm sorry. This is not me just attacking Barack Obama. This is me attacking every single billionaire. When is enough enough? When is enough enough? When would you not take your wealth and then do something? And what they do here's what they do. You know what they spend their money on? accumulating more political power. Now, Barack Obama probably won't have to accumulate more political power because he could do, he was the president, right? Right. He still has an obscene amount of influence politically. But every other billionaire who was not, did not get their wealth through the political system, they used their wealth to manipulate the political system to ensure that their wealth is never taxed at a sufficient enough level to create a society that would have a middle class well off enough to be able to take a step back and breathe and say, how can we make society better versus just working 9 to 5, 10 to 6 every day, all day, not having a chance to breathe or ever consider what we can collectively do as a society to make society better. No rich people can afford to have you have peace of mind enough to take a step back and just consider how we can make society better, because a portion of making society better means taxing the motherfucking rich. All right, let's get back to this interview with John Nichols. I think the second half of this interview obviously it was critical enough. I made it public. So take a listen in and really consider what's being said here. I was entirely discouraged. I didn't really want to buy into his idea that we could fight for the soul of the Democratic Party, because I have a hard time, even right now, believing that there's anything that's salvageable from the ravages of the Democratic Party. But I think his take is inspiring. So that comes up towards the end. So take a listen into the rest of the interview.
It's a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. So without giving away the entirety of the book, because I want everyone to get it and read it, what are the steps? What are we fighting? What's the 1-2 punch? And then what's the haymaker? Like what can we actually do to win the soul of that party?
Well, I think that the initial steps are pretty clear, and that is to seize every opportunity that is available to push the party in a progressive direction. Don't make apologies. Don't be cautious. Don't be neglectful of reality. The polls show that overwhelmingly Americans support Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. They actually support a more radical version of Medicare for all than Bernie Sanders proposed.
Exactly. Yeah.
The polls show that we're up in the 90% level for people wanting to get corporate money out of politics. Mm-hmm. The polls show that we really do passionately support criminal justice reform that goes to the root of the problem. The polls show that we're dramatically more sympathetic to trade unionism than we've been for a very, very long time in history, right? Mm-hmm. So pull no punches. Fight for what you believe in, and understand that there are opportunities right now. These task forces that Biden and Sanders have set up, mm-hmm. I know they're window dressing. I know they were established to make it easier for Joe Biden to, quote unquote, unite the party. But that doesn't mean people have to play along with it in that way. They can use that opening to say, Joe Biden, we're going to help you to be better than you ever imagined you could be. And that means, pushing a dramatically more progressive agenda, and frankly, making an argument that isn't just about the fight, but is also about the reality. Here's something because I know you know politics so well. In 1944, they pushed Wallace out, put Truman in. He was more cautious. Mm-hmm. 1946, Democrats lost their center of gravity in Congress. 1976, Carter came in. He wasn't as ambitious as he should have been. 1978, severe setbacks in Congress. 1992, Clinton gets elected, mm-hmm. not as ambitious as he should be. 1994, and frankly, going very neoliberal on a lot of things. 1994, severe setbacks. 2008, Barack Obama elected with a visionary campaign and tremendous promise, has a very strong congressional majority. But, too many compromises in that initial stage, 2010, mm-hmm. Setbacks. And so here's my point. I would argue that progressives need to say to the Democratic Party, when you get power, and I think there's a decent chance that Biden may get power this year. He may win. But when you get that power, you have to govern on behalf of economic and social and racial justice, saving the planet and ending wars in a big, bold way that's bold enough for people to be excited and engaged and ready to participate with you going forward, so that you hold your majorities as Roosevelt did. And remember, Roosevelt actually did better sometimes in the midterms than he
Right.
did in the initial election. So that's just my message: is that this isn't just about dreaming or hoping. This is about actually making a practice, seizing every opening that's there, but
Yeah.
making a practical argument, and then embracing this rising generation of young leaders, many of them women, people of color, and saying that, we may have the Democratic nominee who's in his 70s this time around, but the future has got to be it's got to be younger, more diverse, and frankly more progressive.
Spare me one last question, and it may seem a little tongue in cheek, but
Don't worry.
how can you possibly be this optimistic after all of your experience, all of the evidence to the contrary? Like, you said something about hope, and I was at the same moment you said hope, I was thinking hope springs eternal. Like, how do you, what gives you the drive to continue this fight when all indications, at least to us, is like it is it's not a fight that we can win.
It is a fight you can win. Um, and it's a fight you have to win. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You see, the lack of options actually gives you hope.
Okay.
When you know there are things that have to be done, you tell yourself the reality. I don't have the luxury of giving up on this struggle.
Hmm.
And one of the things that, as somebody who writes a lot of history, I just have to emphasize that imagine being an anti-slavery campaigner
Mm.
in the first part of the 19th century, right? I mean, you could live your whole life and not achieve your goal, and yet, do we dismiss those who fought the hard fight in the
Right.
1820s, the 1830s, the 1840s, finally forged a Republican Party of all things, and took this thing to the next stage? Similarly, you could have been born in the post-Civil War era as a believer in economic justice, going through the populist era, the progressive era, and you might have lived your whole life without ever even, you might not have made it to the New Deal. You might not have lived long
Wow.
enough to even see the basic things happen. And yet, do we dismiss those
Wow.
who, kept at it? Of course not. We make them. I write books to make them heroes,
Yeah.
and I think I want us to be the heroes of our time, as hard as it may be, as difficult as it may be, and I don't say I have all the answers. I want people to be creative and innovative, and to take the fight to new and exciting places. I write about this stuff. I have the luxury of raising up and celebrating people doing amazing things.
Yeah.
Um, and so that does keep me hopeful,
Wow.
because I look around this country and I see people like you and a lot of other folks who are trying on different platforms. They're trying it in media, in social activism, sometimes in politics, and why do you do what you do? Why does anybody do what they do if they don't think ultimately we can somehow make this thing better?
I love how you put it, because we have no other choice.
That's right.
Everything that you said, I think that's the one that resonates the most to me, as well as the baton handoff. Like, some people who ran this race, all they could do was hand the baton off, and they never saw the finish line. So, thank you for that. That actually helps me out quite a bit. I really, it really does. Because honestly, like, even doing, I'll be honest with you, between you and me and the audience, obviously, it just becomes difficult after so many times saying the same thing over and over and over again, seeing the solution, knowing the solution, and then just dealing with the disingenuousness of politics. It does weigh on you, but I appreciate you framing it the way you did.
Well, my friend, I appreciate you asking it the way you did,
Absolutely.
and I will tell you, um, I look around every day, even in this incredibly difficult time, and I see such heroism. I see people who have the least doing the most.
Mm,
I see people who would have every reason to, feel let down or undermined
yeah.
or frustrated, disenchanted, disengaged, whatever it may be, and yet they pick up and they push forward and they give it everything they have, um, because they love their family and their neighbors and their community and state and their nation and their world, and they're ready to fight.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I have a right to say to them, it's too big a hill or it's too hard a fight.
Right.
I think that I want to say to them, you're the real heroes. It's a people's history. And ultimately, it will be a people's victory.
John Nichols, he is the national affairs correspondent for The Nation and an associate editor for the Capital Times. His newest book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, The Enduring Legacy of Henry Wallace's Anti-Fascist, Anti-Racist Politics. Thanks so much for joining me.
I'm honored to be with you, my friend.
All right. A couple more stories here. Georgia Bureau of Investigation has arrested the man who filmed the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, and they have arrested him on a felony murder charge. According to Yamiche Alcindor, she said this on Twitter. This comes after the family of Arbery and the attorneys have said for weeks that William Bryan also was an aggressor who needed to be arrested. Yeah, goddamn right. He is a guy who called everybody, who made sure that there was a sufficient lynch mob to take out Ahmaud Arbery for doing what video after video after video has shown that everybody else has done in that community time and time and again, which is to go into that abandoned house that was under construction. Apparently the construction has stopped or whatever the case may be. And video after video of people coming in and out of that abandoned construction home. Yet they decided it was Ahmaud Arbery who was the threat that needed to be hunted down and killed. And so, again, the thing about this is not justice. Even if they are found guilty, we are tired of that type of justice. We're tired of them killing us in the first place. And it is not sufficient enough. This system is insufficient. This system has stood by and watched black people be gunned down for generations. This is a trend that has gone through American history. It has ebbed and flowed in terms of the quantity, but it has never ceased. America has a bloody history of killing black people, black men in particular, because it has had a vested interest in protecting the vilified image of blackness. In other words, they need to see a nigger as something threatening because that is how they justify the criminal justice system today. That's how they justify Jim Crow in the past. That's how they justify slavery in this country. By making sure that people feared black people enough to not see them as the same, not see them as human. And this, what we're experiencing now, is a resurgence in that type of thinking, of protecting the vilification of black people at all costs. They can never afford for people to look at America and see that America is bloodstained precisely because of how they view black people. You have to view a black person as a barbarian before you go get your gun and gun them down in the street as if you have the authority to take someone's life. This system has failed us in its entirety, from top to bottom, from the White House to the streets of Brunswick, Georgia. And I'm sorry, but arresting them is never enough, because chances are they're going to find them not guilty because they have already started the process of vilifying Ahmaud Arbery after killing him. But even if they found him guilty, it is not enough. Real justice is not killing us in the first place. And because America is either unable or unwilling to protect us, we must and we will protect ourselves. Well, apparently I was behind the 8 ball. I said it was going to happen before the end of business. Team Trump already put out an advertisement The timestamp is at 11:15 Eastern Standard Time. And this is what they tweeted out with the video. They said, sorry to inform all the black Trump supporters that hashtag you ain't black in Joe Biden's book. Well, the framing of it, I think is insufficient because we don't like the black Trump supporters anyway. So fuck them. Right. But really I'm not going to tell them the framing they need. If they can't think of the fucking framing they need to really milk the shit out of this, then let them be stupid. I'm not going to help them in that regard. So maybe that was a salvo. They've got right now that tweet that was done by a white person. Wait till one of these black Trump supporters get a hold of this shit and make an advertisement out of it. Yeah, then you're going to have some serious problems on your head. On the other side of the equation, you have people like Jamel Hill, formerly of ESPN. This is what she tweeted out. She said, quote, the issue wasn't what Joe Biden said because it was accurate. The fuck? Okay, let me finish reading. The issue wasn't what Joe Biden said because it was accurate. The issue was that it came from Biden. It also was clearly a joke that didn't land. Y'all really doing some stepping and fetching ass. God damn. But I'm wondering where all this outrage was yesterday when y'all president declared his public devotion to a Nazi sympathizer. The outrage was always there. If you're going to do a whataboutism, okay, oh my God. First of all, black folks, you are not required to step and fetch, shuck and jive on behalf of Joe Biden. Especially if you're not on payroll. Now, if you're on payroll, then I suspect that you're going to give your best foot forward to do what you can. Blah, 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 blah. That's your fault for working for the man. But you are not required, especially if you're not on payroll, to defend this man. Just call it like it is. He was dead ass wrong. Period. I don't care if it was a joke. White folks have gotten smacked for a lot less than that. It was a joke and it landed. It didn't land right. You got white friends that you let joke with you like that? Where they do that at? What black folks in my audience got white friends that you let joke about your blackness? I'm curious. You could not have possibly been listening to my show any amount of time. You can't. You must be listening to those, the other shows that actually get large paychecks. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show. Man, as we get ready to end this week, it's been a beautiful week. Thank you for being a beautiful audience. I just want to say one last thing before I get ready to go and call it a day. Shout out to everybody on YouTube who watches the live stream. But you should also go download the full podcast. Go to Apple and wherever the podcast, Spreaker, Stitch It, all those other places, Stitch It, whatever. You get it. But here's the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that we have reduced our politics in this country to being nothing more than, what I'm getting ready to say, than the red team versus the blue team. And we have created a situation so desperate enough where people would vote against their own best economic interests just to get rid of the person the red team put up. The red team has gotten Donald Trump in office, and by all means, by every estimate, he is the most destructive president that we have seen in our lifetimes. But that does not negate the fact that all the rest of the presidents have neglected us. See, I was getting ahead of myself. I said neglect. But what I was trying to say is how bad Donald Trump is does not negate the fact that all the other presidents have neglected us. And if you want to know who us is, it's everyone who's not a millionaire or a billionaire. It's everyone who is not living off of their capital gains. It's damn near every single black person in this country. There's probably fewer black people living off of capital gains in this country than I could count on one hand. That didn't come off right, but you know what I'm trying to say. We have been neglected by this entire system. And yes, granted, we can see how Donald Trump is literally getting people killed, but the die is cast on that. We're talking about this whole system is so broken. We are locked into Donald Trump to January 21st. By then, probably 1 million people are going to already be dead. And Donald Trump is a product of this system, a system that both Democrats and Republicans protect. Why aren't the Democrats actually doing something about Donald Trump right now? Why are they using all their energy on Twitter when they have all the power of the House of Representatives? So there's another problem here as well. The people who listen to Charlamagne the Guy, the people who listen to, because Charlamagne the Guy, whether you like him or not, he has a good foothold in the hip hop community and the black culture, part of the black culture that the black political elite will never touch. The black misleadership class, you have no access there. You're no more welcome there than any other politician because they look at you as though you have sold them out because you have. And that conversation that Joe Biden just had went into the radios and the podcasts and the YouTube channel of all the people who think that the Democrats have sold them out anyway and that there's no difference. Because at the end of the day, what is the difference? Donald Trump is going to get us killed. Yes, he is. That's why I'm so pissed off, because he's got to go. Because at a minimum, even if the Democratic Party, as terrible as they are in terms of not doing anything for anybody, at least they would not have sat around and heightened its conditions to make us die from the coronavirus. I think we can all agree. They would at least try to be efficient enough to minimize that, to minimize the number of deaths. So yes, Donald Trump is a unique threat. He still needs to go. But the Democratic Party has just signaled to a lot of people who kind of don't really pay attention to politics a whole lot, who already have the suspicion that Democrats are the same as Republicans. They have now signaled on a major station, on a major broadcast, that in fact, not only are they basically the same as Republicans, but, you know, the person they picked to be the nominee is pretty damn racist himself. Because you ain't black if you don't know the difference between me and Joe Trump. Well, I would fix that, but I might as well leave it as it is, Joe Trump. So you guys got a whole lot to fix, and y'all better not lose this goddamn election. And if you winning this election requires me to step and fetch around the fact that you picked the absolute worst candidate out of the entire lot, then shit, you were never going to win this shit in the first place. I hate to tell you. Have a great weekend, everyone. See you next time.